Jai Bala. And thank you to Margaret and Sam and the board and Eric and Ellen for having me today. I feel very fortunate that Greg and I can be here on the 65th anniversary of my parents being here with Bala. And we're just so lucky to have Marymount. I can't emphasize that enough. The places that Bala has been help us so much to remember him and to concentrate on him and to catch a whiff of him. So I just think this is so fortunate that we can all be here today. And also, we have Bala's tree, which I was so happy to see has lots of green leaves coming out. And the tree not only helps us remember Bala's stay here and all the trees that have been associated with Bala, but also the tree has a memory of Bala's stay here as it's a living being, and it can help us if we just sit with the tree and think about Bala. So with that, I just want to remember that Bala said, try to love me through nature. He said that here. And we should take him at his word. So, Jai Bala. So, how did our family come to Bala? I should say before I launch into that, not only were my parents here on August 2nd, 1956 with Bala, but then just within the same week, the rest of our family met Bala, including my Aunt Eleanor and her children in San Francisco. And then a few months later, in November of that year, my father took all of our family down to Marymount to be with Agnes Barron. And that's when the photos were taken that Margaret posted on the newsletter from Marymount. So that all happened within a short amount of time. So anyway, my dad, Joan Dimpfl, was born in Germany, and he was born to a very devout family who were Catholic apostolics, which, as I understand it, was a fairly new form of Christianity that felt that God could perform miracles as easily now as 2,000 years ago. So it was kind of a refreshing, trying to refresh the Christian church. And so when my dad was 2, his family came over to the United States, and my father belonged to the Catholic Apostolic Church with his family, and then he married my mother in 1942, and in around 1947, 1948, he had a crisis of faith and became an atheist. And he was, as always, a very devout atheist. He was he was all in, whatever he was in. And around the same time, in January of 1948, Murshida Ivy Deuce of Sufism went over to India to meet Meher Bala for the first time and decide whether he was for real or not. Her teacher, Murshida Martin, had originally told her to go to India. Actually, Murshida Martin had meant to go to India, and then she became ill with cancer and couldn't go. So she sent Ivy Deuce over to India. And Ivy Deuce became convinced that Bala was the avatar at that point. And So anyway, as fate would have it, shortly thereafter, my father, who was a chemical engineer, was working at Chevron, and he happened to be put in an office with Don Stevens. And he immediately really bonded with Don, and he thought he was a great guy, very grounded, and made a lot of sense to my father. And so eventually Don introduced him to Murshid Adus, and Dad became a Sufi, without, I guess, fully knowing what happened to him. And it was still, I don't know when he first learned about Baba within Sufism. Sufism was still very much influenced by Inayat Khan. They still had 3 different kinds of meetings that they held, depending on people's commitments. And so Murshid would give my father, she felt that he needed to round out his education, so she gave him a huge reading list of books to read. And then one day, my father made some positive comment about communists, and Murshid Adus reacted in complete horror. And Dad said, well, what's wrong with communists? And she said, well, for one thing, they don't believe in God. And my dad thought, do we believe in God? Well, I guess we do. So things kind of snuck up on my dad. And anyway, in 1952, May 1952, Baba came to the United States, and he was eventually to come out to California, and a lot of Californians were going to wait until Baba came to California, but my dad decided he couldn't wait, and so he flew to Myrtle Beach to meet Baba for the first time. And that proved to be a very good decision, because Baba later had the accident in Prague, Oklahoma, on the way going across the country. So anyway, so my dad went in for his 5-minute interview with Baba for the first time, and I believe it was Merji and Adi who were in the room, in the interview cabin with my dad and Baba, and my dad had already decided what he was going to say, but he was a little inhibited because of what he was going to say when he saw these other 2 guys there. But they looked like they wouldn't, they wouldn't repeat whatever they had heard. So he decided to forge ahead, and he said, Baba, I have this promising new career in chemical engineering, but compared to you, that is nothing. And I want to come to India and live with you in India. And Baba seemed very taken aback. And then he embraced my dad, and my dad said it felt like he was reading him. And then Baba sat back, and he said, today you've made me very happy. And then Baba called Murshid Adus into the room, and Dad said about 10 other people piled into the room at the same time. And Baba told my dad to repeat what he had just said. And my dad said, I want to come to India to live with you, Baba. And Murshid immediately said, but Baba, he can't do that. He has a wife and 3 children and 1 more on the way. And Baba looked surprised. And, my dad thought, well, Baba, you're God, you know everything. Well, I don't have to tell you this. So Baba, and Baba said, is that true, lad? And Dad said, yes, Baba. And Baba said, I've seen them. Today I call them my angels. And Dad thought, they've died. And he thought, is that the price I have to pay in order to go to India with Baba? And he thought, I didn't want, that's not what I meant, Baba. Please, I take it back. Anyway, he said later he decided this was Baba's way of letting him know that he was too attached to his children and he wasn't ready to come to India. So anyway, Baba said, that's okay. I'll come when I send for you in a year's time. Come to India in a year's time when I send for you. And meanwhile, be absolutely honest. And did he say anything else? And he also sent a message to my mother, who I guess didn't know what was going on in California, to tell her, she was to tell my father that he was not to sell the house or quit his job. And my mother, according to my father, would remind him of this early and often. So anyway, Dad went back to California, back home, and since he couldn't do anything yet about going to India, he decided he'd focus on the absolutely honest order from Baba, and he told everyone at his work the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth about what he thought of them. And things were gradually becoming hotter and hotter at Chevron from my father, and my dad was counting the days on the calendar for the year mark, and the year came and went, and there was still no call from Baba. So, and when the call did come, it was in 2 years, and it was just for 3 weeks, for the 3 incredible weeks that the 17 Western men went to in India. So this was a little bit of a surprise for my dad, but I guess he was still glad to get out of town. So Dad immediately noticed how Baba was the perfect host in India. I mean, from the minute they touched ground in India, Baba had seen to their every need, and that was always the case in all of the times that there were Sahavas. Baba was very detail-oriented and looking to the comfort of the visitors. And so anyway, the first thing that happened when they met with Baba is that Baba told the Western man to make themselves completely at home. Do whatever you have to feel comfortable. And so Dad had been trying to quit smoking, but he thought, well, Baba says to make ourselves comfortable, so he pulled out a pack of cigarettes and started smoking. And later on, after that first meeting, Maharaji pulled him aside and he said, I know Baba said to make yourself Oh, and Dad had actually asked Baba, is it okay if I smoke? And Baba said, sure, go for it. So Mehrdji said he didn't really mean that. You know, Baba hates smoking, and nobody smokes around Baba. So Dad felt really terrible. But then when they met with Baba again, Baba noticed that he wasn't smoking, and he asked Dad about it, and Dad told him that what Mehrdji had said. And Baba said, do you listen to Mehrdji or do you listen to me? So Dad got the message who the boss was. So the arrangements at Mehrabad were that the upstairs in the tower in Upper Mehrabad had been where the women Mandali stayed, but it had been turned into a dormitory for the 17 Western men. And there were beds across from each other, and they had sheets pulled around them to keep them there were sheets that they could pull around them for privacy. And Joseph Harb's bed was right directly across from Dad's. And Joseph Harb, I don't know if people know of Joseph Harb. He was a real sweetheart and my Sunday school teacher later on, but he also was in the San Francisco area. But anyway, he had this habit of when he opened up a suitcase, he'd put it on Dad's bed and open it up and take his stuff out and then leave it on Dad's bed. And that just drove my dad absolutely bonkers. And about the third time this happened, my dad just couldn't take it anymore. Nobody was, my dad couldn't take it anymore, so he took the suitcase and he dumped the entire contents back on Joseph's bed. And just then, Baba's car came up, and Baba was coming for the daily talk downstairs that Baba would give, and everybody ran downstairs. And at the last minute, my dad had a change of heart and thought, that wasn't very nice. So he ran back and he stuffed everything back in Joseph's suitcase and put it under Joseph's bed. And just at that moment, he heard Baba say to Francis Brabazon, of course it wasn't Baba who was saying it, someone was saying it for Baba, but he said, now Francis, if you're ever mad at somebody, don't dump the contents of their suitcase on their bed. And Francis said, now why would I do a crazy thing like that, Baba? So Dad, started to get a clue of who he was dealing with here. So they would have many days where Baba, sitting in front of Baba, and Baba would be distributing prasad to people, not just the Westerners, but Indians. And my dad would notice how often the way Baba distributed the prasad would be very individual. Like he noticed once there was this little boy about 6 years old who put out his hands for the candy, and this great big guy came up behind him and put his hands right over the little boy's hands. And without missing a beat, Baba took this big load of candy and he shot it into the little boy's hands underneath and just held one piece of candy and put it in the big man's hands. So, and Dad said this all happened so fast, in the blink of an eye. You really had to be paying attention to notice all this that was going on. Another incident that happened was that at one point Baba took all of the Westerners to Sikori, to Upasni Maharaj's tomb. And he told them Upasni Maharaj was my master, so I would like you all to bow down to his tomb. And my dad, was thinking, thank God my father can't see me now, This would confirm his worst fears that I had become a total pagan. And, but there's no way he'll know about this. So anyway, they got lined up to bow down, then put their head down at the foot of Upasni's tomb. And just as it was Dad's turn, Baba put his hand on the back of my dad's neck and held his head down. And just as he was doing that, another Westerner took a flash photo. So that plan was foiled. And then I remember in 1991 when we went to India, Balna too had that picture, and he told us the story with great glee. He was, it was immortalized. So anyway, when my dad came back from India on that trip, he knew Baba was the avatar. And he also, he carried back with him the final declaration, and he also carried with him the manuscript for God Speaks for Mersh to Deuce and Don Stevens to edit. So the next time that Baba came to America was 1956, and that's when he came to Marymount, and he had a big itinerary. He was going to go to New York and Washington, D.C. and Myrtle Beach, and then L.A. and Ojai and San Francisco. And he allowed people who could afford it to come with him, to travel with him, and he called them his doves. So Dad was one of the doves that went with him from Myrtle Beach to Los Angeles and then to Ojai. And this is, Sam has already talked about everything that happened here in Ojai when Baba was here, and about how there was that big meeting in the guest house in front of the fireplace right over there, where Dana Fields was pressuring Baba to eat grapes and nuts, I think, and Baba had said, I really don't like milk or fruit, but he went ahead, and I think it was grapes that he ate. And then he had everybody keep quiet and supposedly meditate, but then you heard Baba's tummy rumbling terribly. And Dana Fields was just mortified. And Baba said, see what happens? I try to please my lovers. And Dana said, I'll never ask anybody to do anything again, ever. And and Baba said, I think in 700 years, there won't be any more grapes in the world. I'll do away with grapes, and maybe that'll help reduce drunkenness. And then Mersh Du said something like, well, I don't like milk either, Baba. And Sparky Luke said, shh, we're not gonna, if you keep that up, we're not gonna have steak either. So that anyway, that was a beautiful day, and Baba went out by the tree, by his tree, and said at that time, try to love Baba through nature. And then he got in the car and got taken up to San Francisco, to Holiday Lodge, where there were about 60 Californians, or not just Californians, but about 60 Baba lovers who had also checked into the Holiday Lodge to be with Baba. And that it was very hard to get that many rooms together in one hotel in San Francisco that week, because there was the Republican National Convention in the city. And of course, you've heard all about how there was kind of some shenanigans on the part of the management where they put Baba, and Baba didn't like his room, and of course everybody was stressed out, and Baba was threatening to leave the hotel because he didn't like it unless they got better accommodations. So anyway, eventually that was straightened out. So this was the first time the Dimpfl children and my Aunt Eleanor and her children got to meet Baba. And my sister Diane, the oldest in our family, who was 13 at the time, she just went gaga for Baba right away. And she was a very live wire. So she was kind of front and center, and she didn't hold back in what she wanted from Baba. So she immediately asked him for a nickname. And which I could never do, but those who ask get. You learn that. You learn that. And so Baba called her BBB for Baba's beloved baby. And apparently one of the Mondli, it might have been Adi, muttered in the background, more like Baba's babbling brook. So anyway, I'm going to pass around a photo that Herman Alvarado took on that time. You can see Baba with all the children, not all of the children, but there's the Alvarado daughters, Sandra and Magda Alvarado. There's my sister Threeby and my brother Bill, and I'm down in the bottom of the frame with my nose perched on the frame. And then there's my cousin Lily Smith and my cousin Wayne, or Skeeter Smith, in that picture. And you can see that Threeby is very proprietary of Baba. She just claimed him as her own right away. And so Baba made a big fuss about Threeby right away. He liked her personality. She was bubbly. She was, and she knew who he was right away. So at one point, he asked her, "What do you want to do for a living when you grow up?" And she said, immediately, "Paint all the avatars." And so Baba had her come up to, there was a bench outside of his room on the balcony, and he had her come and sit right next to him and just look at his face for a long, long time. And Threeby got a very good look at him, and she talked about the changing faces of love that she saw on Baba's face. Sometimes he was vivacious and smiling. And sometimes he was majestic and kingly, but effortlessly. And sometimes he would look kind of wistful, like, do you think you could love me? And later on, I remember once we were looking at a calendar of Baba photos, and she said, yeah, there's that look in Baba's face. It's, where does it hurt? It's like he's asking you, where does it hurt? And so anyway, so my mother wasn't as immediately attracted to Baba, and I think 3B and Aunt Ellie kind of were very judgmental. They formed their own little clique. And my mother, my poor mother, had a harder time getting 3B to do what she wanted her to do. And so one day, Mom, while we were at Holiday Lodge, Mom decided that 3B's hair was a mess and she needed to get a cut and a perm, and she wanted to take her home in Berkeley to get it done. And 3B didn't want that at all, but my mom said, no, you got to do this, and don't go running to Baba about this. And so 3B didn't run to Baba, but then Charmian Deuce, Mershda's daughter, and Tara Frey, who was a young girl, she was one of Fred Frey's children, came by to our hotel room and asked if 3B wanted to do something with them that day, and she said, I can't, I gotta get my hair cut and perm even though I don't want it. And so the next thing you know, they went running off to Baba and told Baba, and so Baba sent a messenger saying, 3B, Baba wants to see you right away. So without asking Mom, 3B ran to Baba, and Baba told her to tell Mom that he liked 3B's hair long, she should leave it long, and she shouldn't get it cut. And so, and he had 3B repeat that message 3 times before she went and told Mom. So that was the end of that. And 3B eventually grew her hair so long she could sit on it. That's why she kept it so long. So there were lots, as always, around Baba, there were lots of these little petty jealousies that kind of came to the surface. And for one thing, I know a lot of the time when my dad was driving Baba around on the sightseeing tours of San Francisco, like to Fisherman's Wharf and Chinatown and Coit Tower and Lombard Street, 3B often would be in the front of the car next to Baba. And my brother Bill would be in the back seat. He was 2 years younger and much quieter and shyer, but Baba noticed this, and at some point he yanked out 3B and put Bill in the front and asked him if he felt better now. And also, apparently at that time, Aunt Eleanor had a major jealousy going on of my mom, which it features later in the story, but a lot of it had to do with my dad marrying Mom and taking Dad away from my Aunt Elliot, because they had been very close before that. So anyway, at some point, all the stress on my dad of, the hotel arrangements and the driving and all that, I guess, I don't know what happened, but my dad came down with pneumonia in the hotel. And so he was flat on his back, and Baba came to the hotel room, to Dad's hotel room, and he said, now, aren't you glad you got sick? Because now you have a personal visit from me. And he told my dad he would get better in 2 days, which was kind of hard to believe. And he gave my mom instructions for what to do. And he said, this has averted a catastrophe that would have happened in a few months from now. So you should be very glad that you got this. And sure enough, Dad got well in 2 days. Anyway, then apparently my dad and mom at this time had a lot of disagreements about finances. And my dad, according to Don Stevens, was a walking actuarial system, because my dad had figured out our finances, our family's finances, 15 years in advance as to what we could afford and couldn't afford. And my mother wanted a new house. And so one day she came to see my dad, and she's in the room, and she said, I've been talking with Baba all about our finances, and he knows how to straighten everything out. And my dad was very apprehensive. So anyway, when the time came for their interview, everybody had one interview with Baba, and so when the time came for their interview with Baba, Baba said to my mom and dad, okay, well, what do you want to talk about? My dad said, well, I guess we need to talk about our finances. And Baba looked very unhappy and shocked even, and he said, you should not have brought up finances. And my dad, you should not have brought that up today. And my dad was just shattered, and he wanted to change the subject. And he said, oh, let's forget that then. Let's not talk about finances. And Baba said, no, you've brought it up, so we're going to talk about it. And so my dad said, well, Baba, B wants a new house, but if we have a new house, then I can't send our 4 kids to college. So Baba turned to Mom and said, do you want a new house? And Mom said, yes, I want a new house. And Baba said, okay, Blood, get her a new house. And Dad said, so that means we won't send our kids to college, right, Baba? And Baba said, no, you must get them the best education possible. My dad was just kind of stunned. He didn't know what is there something I'm doing here?
It's always the wind.
Okay. So anyway, Dad just didn't know. He was just recalculating 15 years in advance again, and he said, so Baba, that means I should, at the time he was tithing himself, and he was paying the rent on the Sufi Center on Sutter Street. And he said, so I guess that means I need to stop my donations to the Sufis. And Baba said, no, you can't reduce or diminish in any way your donation to the Sufis. And my dad was just going tilt. His brain was going tilt. And he said, and I guess he collapsed. According to him, he collapsed in Maharaji's arms, who held him up. And then Baba turned very sweetly to Mom and said, is there anything else, B? And Mom said, yes, Baba. Lud doesn't want to get me any health insurance, not health insurance, life insurance, and I don't feel very secure. So Dad at this point thought Mom was quite mad. And Baba said, okay, lad, get her all the health insurance, all the insurance she wants. And then he said, okay, lad, I've solved all your financial problems. and Baba turned to Mom and he said, you will never, he said, I almost never say this to anybody, but you will never have to worry about money in this lifetime. And to this day, it's true. She's 101 and a half. She's living in her own home. She had 6 caregivers. She's as happy as a clam. So he solved all our financial problems.
So much for that health insurance.
Yeah. So anyway, what happened as a result of this meeting was that my dad and Mom built this home in Kentfield, which ended up where Baba stayed 2 years later, overnight. And my dad, meanwhile, our bank account was draining, and as my dad predicted that we would go broke in early 1961. But as it happened at work, he got an offer of a transfer to work in Iran in May of 1960 with a 50% raise. So he was able to afford everything that Baba had told him to get. So that's how it turned out. But Dad said at that point he stopped worrying about money. So anyway, on the last full day in 1956, we all went to Muir Woods. It had been that the day before my mom had taken, she was always a very gracious hostess, and she had taken Jeannie Shaw and the Shaw's 2 daughters to Muir Woods, and Jeannie Shaw thought it was so beautiful that Baba just had to come there. So the next day, we all trekked over to Muir Woods, and Baba sat under the ancient redwood tree there with all the children around him, and apparently he asked one small child, do you love me? And she said, I do if you love my mommy. And Baba just got the sweetest smile on his face. And according to 3B Tara Frey, the one I mentioned before, Fred Frey's young daughter, at one point said, I hate myself. And Baba said, you must never say that. You must never think that even. And 3B said she heard him say on many occasions to people, I'm never displeased with you. Or he'd say, I'm always pleased with you. So anyway, it was 2 years more before Baba came back to Myrtle Beach. I should say all that time in 1956, I was, most of the time because I was under 7, I was stuck in a crib in front of a TV set, so I don't have a whole lot of memories of that, but I do remember being in Muir Woods on that occasion. I don't remember seeing Baba actually that time, but anyway. So it was 2 more years before Baba came back to the United States, and in the interim, we would get family letters from Mani, his sister, and she would tell us everything that was going on in India, and they really helped us in those dry 2 years. We just loved getting the family letters, and sometimes there would be cables that would go back and forth. Like Dad would send cables on Baba's birthday or on Christmas, or if somebody in the family died, Dad would send a cable, and Bob would always say something like, my love to, and he would mention all of our names, Lud, B, 3B, Bill, Claudia, and Joan. My love to you all, and so-and-so has come to me. So that was always very comforting. Anyway, so when Baba came to Myrtle Beach in 1958, Dad stayed on the center, and the rest of us, Mom and the kids and my Aunt Eleanor, stayed in a motel off-site. And again, because I was only 6 at this time, so I wasn't able to, no, I wasn't even 6, I was 5, so I wasn't able to go most of the time on the center because there was a cutoff at 7 years old. But the rest of the kids and Mom would go every day to the center. And Claudia was 10 at the time, and Bob gave her the task of every time he left Baba's house in the car, he would have her run ahead of the car like the advance guard. So Baba had that way of giving children some task to do to help them feel important and connected to him. So nobody was left out, and he would just notice every little kid that you'd think he wouldn't notice. And 3B at this time was 15, and but there were so many people. There were many more people around Baba in Myrtle Beach in 1958 than there were in 1956 in Holiday Lodge. So it was getting harder for 3B to get access to Baba. And this frustrated her, so she was kind of plotting with my Aunt Ellie how they could get closer to Baba more often. And so I guess a bunch of Sufi men had gotten together and formed what they called the Alligator Club to do, entertainment for Baba, skits and music and so forth. So she and Aunt Ellie decided to cook up this Stinkers Club, which sole aim was to get access to Baba by whatever means necessary. So they made up a bunch of little membership cards, and they each had a picture of a skunk on it with the name of a flower. This was the time of Bambi, so if you remember, the skunk and Bambi, I think, had the name of a flower. But so they made up these membership cards. I think they made them for the Mondali too. They made the one for Erich. His name was Magnolia. And they were trying to get other people to join, and I think Phyllis Frederick was willing and Beryl Williams was willing, but they were having trouble getting anybody else to join in. And then finally 3B asked Adi if they could have access to Baba. And Adi said, well, of course. Baba said you could see him anytime you wanted to. So 3B was delighted, and she and Aunt Ellie went before Baba and presented Baba with a membership card. And he was the president, she said, because he was the biggest stinker of them all. And she said Baba laughed so hard that she could hear it in his nose. So anyway, there was this incident of one day, Dad and 3B were in a room with Baba, and Baba was drinking 7-Up, and there was more 7-Up there to drink, and 3B was about to drink some 7-Up. Here she was 15, and Baba started expressing concern that he asked Dad, do you let 3B drink 7-Up? And 3B said, what? Why shouldn't I drink 7-Up? And Baba said, well, it's so cold. It's so cold. He kept touching the 7-Up glass, and he said, you might come down with a cold or something. And 3B thought this was absolutely ridiculous. So she said, I drink it all the time, Baba. But Baba didn't want her to drink any, and so when Baba wasn't looking, she drank the entire glass of 7-Up. And she said the next day she woke up with a horrendous sore throat. And so she had to stay in bed and miss the festivities for many days until she got better. And she said by the time she got better, Charles Haynes was now Baba's favorite child. And so she said she tried to hang around Charles Haynes to see if any of it would rub off, but it didn't. So anyway, let's see. Of course, I was allowed on the center when Baba had the birthday party with his cake. All of the children who hadn't been able to come otherwise got to come that day, and that's where I lined up with everybody else and got Baba, where Baba wrapped his arm around me and gave me prasad, and so that I just barely remember that, but it makes me very happy when I see those pictures of Baba putting his arm around me. And let's see. Yeah, that was the thing about Baba you realized as a kid, was that he was very kid-friendly. I mean, like we would learn these various finger games that Baba would do like that, and we were just delighted that Baba would think that was a good thing to do, a sensible thing to do. I know Erich, I think Baba used to do finger games with Erich when he was a bit older than us, and he just was turned off by the whole thing, but for us it was delightful. Anyway. So anyway, the meeting came to the last day, and pretty kind of at the spur of the moment, Baba changed plans and decided that he would spend the night at our house. He was going to fly out of Wilmington and I guess stop maybe in LA and then go on to San Francisco and stay at our house overnight before he went on to Australia. So anyway, and Dad was going to join him. So anyway, just before Dad was leaving the center for the airport, he found out that 3B was once again taking Aunt Ellie's side against Mom about something. I forget what it was about, but anyway, my dad just hit the roof and he just chewed Aunt Ellie and 3B out to the point that they were in tears. And then he left for the airport to meet Baba. And when he got to the airport, Baba saw Dad coming, and Baba said, "Hi, Lud, are you happy?" And Dad said, "Oh yes, Baba, I'm happy, I'm good." And Baba said, "And your family? Is your family happy too?" And Dad said, actually, they were in tears when I left." And Baba said, "Oh, why? And Dad told him the whole incident. And Baba said, you were right to do as you did, but you should have waited until, this trip was all over. So anyway, so there was a lot going on that day at the airport, at the Wilmington airport, when 3B and my mom and Aunt Eleanor arrived. Baba called them all around him, and he had, let's see, I think Baba's hand was on, he had them pile their hands on top of his. I think it was Baba's hands first, then 3B's hand, then Mom's hand, then my Aunt Eleanor's hand, and then Baba slapped his hands on the top and he said, now we're all friends. And 3B said in time they all did become friends. So that happened at the Wilmington airport that day too. And another thing happened. There was a lot going on at the Wilmington airport on that day before Baba left. There was a ton of people at the airport inside before the flight took off. And Baba was sitting on a platform, a little raised platform. He was sitting in a chair with Eric next to him. And it was hard to squeeze through because there were so many people crunched together. But the children were brought to sit in front of the platform so they could be close to Baba, even the children who hadn't been able to attend because they were too young, and that included me. I was able to sit there before Baba left, and there was some nice lady who was, because we were sitting just straight on the floor in the airport, there was some nice lady who came and offered some cardboard for us to sit on. And so I didn't know, I was kind of indiscriminate at that age, but, I thought it was sweet that she offered this cardboard to sit on, so I sat on it. And at one point, Eric started pointing in my direction, and I thought, he can't be pointing to me. And I waited a bit, and then he pointed directly at me, and he said, come up. So I came up kind of hesitantly, and he brought me close to Baba, and Baba told me a secret. And then I went and sat back down again, and I was never to tell the secret. And it's like that embedded that moment in my memory forever. It's like I can remember, that's the only thing I truly remember, that day I remember the most because of that. It's like Baba was so sensitive to even little kids like me who didn't have a clue. So anyway, Baba then took off with Dad. Oh boy, I'm really running way over time. Well, I have so much more to say, but anyway. So Baba stayed that night in our house. It was May 30th, 1958. It was Memorial Day weekend, and there were incidences that happened on the flight with Baba and my dad. But anyway, to make a long story short, they arrived in SFO at 9 o'clock at night, and they got into my dad's car, and Baba kept asking on the way to our house how far it was and how long it was going to take. and it took an entire hour, so they didn't get there until 10 p.m. at night. And Baba, when they got to our house, he started asking about everything. Where are the rooms? What are the beds? How many servants are there? And he acted surprised that my mom had no servants to help her with this big house. So anyway, after Baba looked around, he decided to sleep in 3B's room, and except because we had all left in such a rush and we had no idea that Baba was coming, 3B's room was a disaster area, and Baba said, "Who lives here, a must?" So anyway, Baba drew a line across the middle of the house, and my dad wasn't supposed to cross it, except he had to do it briefly to turn on the hot water and the water heater. I mean the regular heater. And then he and Adi ran out to try to find food on Memorial Day weekend at 10 o'clock at night. And the only thing that they could find was from the hamburger joint called the Eat and Run. So anyway, they got some stuff, and I don't know, Baba not being a meat eater or what. I think maybe he got a milkshake or something. But anyway, that was at 11:30 at night. They all went to bed finally. In Nariman, just before Dad went to bed, Nariman, Dada Chanji came from Baba and told him, Baba says he hasn't slept well for a long time, but tonight he will sleep very well. So anyway, I'm going to pass this around. These are the luggage tags that my dad saved in their original frame and condition of Baba and the Mandali members' luggage that night. So anyway, I'll just mention briefly that after Baba left, in maybe 8 months later, Baba sent, as a kind of brother, Digambar Gadigar. He was the son of the non-resident Mandali member Ramachandran Gadigar, and he had come down with Hodgkin's disease just shortly before Digambar was to leave for the U.S. to go to graduate school at UC Berkeley, and he was very concerned about Digambar in the U.S. So Baba instructed Digambar to spend all of his weekends. While he was in graduate school, he spent all of his weekends with our family. And that was a lovely thing. He and Dad and 3B would stay up all night telling Baba stories, and he taught us the Indian arti, and he was just wonderful. And to this day, he calls our mother Mom. So anyway, then the East-West Gathering came in November 1962, and at that time, 4 of our family members were in the Middle East because of that job my dad had to take to pay for the house that my mom wanted. So eventually 5 out of 6 of my family were able to go, and only my sister Claudia was given the difficult order that she had to stay in school still because they wouldn't let her out. But Baba told her he would be with her just as much as if she had come to India. And at the time, 3B was 19, Bill was 17, Claudia was 15, and I was 10. So when we came to India, it was the time of Diwali, and it seemed, the Diwali festival when there were fireworks everywhere and lights on all the houses, and it really seemed like everybody knew that Baba was having darshan. And Baba put us up in the turf club in Pune, which was a very, for me, palatial place coming from Iran, which was not palatial. And there were a lot of the Americans were put up there. Murshid Deuce was there, the Hassans were there, and the Hayneses were there. And Baba prepared us, as always. He was the perfect host, and he prepared us for the change in his appearance between 1958 and 1962. He sent Merji around to the different hotels where people were staying with big photos about his current photos, and we could see that he had aged quite a bit. So it was kind of startling to see that. And at that time, also, I was turning skeptical at age 10. I was my critical facilities kicked in, shall we say. And I really didn't know what I thought about it at this point. And anyway, I received a message individually at age 10, a copy of the message that everybody got their own individual message, but mine said, "Dear Joan, my health is very bad, but your love will help to sustain me during the times of the East-West gathering, Avatar Mirabala." And I thought, well, first of all, I thought, wow, I'm being treated on equal footing, even though I'm just 10 years old. Wow, that's kind of nice. But on the other hand, I just didn't know that I loved Baba, and I didn't know how I could help sustain him if I didn't love him, and I felt kind of guilty about that. But anyway, and also I was kind of critical of some of the other people who were there to see Baba. Like there was this lady who, she had red hair, and she would talk very loudly, and she talked a lot about how she couldn't wait to get to the bazaar and start buying saris and things, and I was just very critical. I thought, wow, this isn't what we're here for, is it? But anyway, so on the first day of the Sahavas in Guru Prasad, in the morning, it was the Western Women's Time, and that woman, we were all gathered on the veranda in front of Guru Prasad Hall, and we took off our shoes and left them there, and there was a big crowd of women there, waiting to crush in and see Baba. And I saw next to me the red-headed lady, and she had this huge box of Kleenex, and she was announcing that she had brought it because she had heard the first time you saw Baba, you often cried. And I thought, is this ostentatious or what? Anyway, so after a few minutes, we gradually squeezed in through the doors, and the crowd parted, and there was Baba. And he was so small, and he was very pink, and he was just glowing. He was just glowing. And for some reason, he just looked so approachable. And for some reason, I looked over at the red-headed lady. She was bawling her eyes out. And I just was so moved by her and by her tears, and I just wanted to wrap my arms around her. And I kind of felt that it was because of Baba that I was feeling this way. So anyway, the feeling when we all came and sat down in the room in front of Baba, the feeling that I that I had was that Baba knew everything about me, every single little thing about me, and he accepted me exactly as I was, and there was no reason to be anybody else. And if I were to summarize in 3 words what the feeling was, it was home at last. Home at last. Anyway, so Baba didn't say very many things to me at all during the East-West gathering. And the one thing that he did say to me was, he pointed to me and he said, "Are you 3B's sister?" And I thought, oh my gosh, even God thinks of me as 3B's sister. Anyway, I'm gonna cut some of these stories out. But anyway, I would hang out a lot of the time with Mani, Baba's sister, in the office on the side because she was so much fun to be around for a kid. She was very lively and funny and told lots of great stories. So I hung out a lot with her. And one day towards the end of the Sahavas, I decided I wanted to go see Mani, so I went running up the stairs, front stairs of Guru Prasad, to go see Mani, and I stopped short on the veranda because Baba was there in Guru Prasad Hall alone with Erich. And at that moment, Baba looked up at me. He looked directly at me, and I knew at that moment Baba was God and that I would never doubt it. So anyway, we went back after that, back to the U.S., and I became I was just glowing with Baba and Baba's love. And I kept the Everything and the Nothing, the book, in my desk at school, and I would sneak it out and read it from time to time. But I guess I must have talked about something because I went to school at that time. In my class was a girl named Trudy Ferguson, who was Heather Nadell's sister. They also lived in Marin County where we lived. And Heather Nadell later told me that the first inkling that she had about God was when Trudy Ferguson came home one day from school and said, "You know, there's a girl at school who believes in God." And Heather Nadell said, "Oh yeah, sure, lots of people believe in God." And Trudy said, "No, she really believes in God." and Heather said she said chills went up and down her spine, and she said, maybe there's something to this after all. Anyway, there's lots of other stories I could tell, but I guess I'll just I'll tell one thing about as an adult, I've had a very ambivalent relationship with groups of Baba lovers. I would say sometimes I think they're a great thing, and other times I'm not so sure. But anyway, the thing that convinced me of the truth of what Baba said, that it's a good thing for people to get together and talk about him and exchange ideas and memories about Baba, was sometime maybe around 2014, 2015, Mara Arjani came and she gave a talk about her family's connection with Baba, and she was Sam Karawala's daughter. And she's related to Marwan and the Jaswalas, and anyway, she gave this wonderful talk about her family's connection to Baba, and during that talk she mentioned that her family had come and stayed with our family in 1967. And when they came back, I learned during her talk that when they came back, Baba questioned her very closely about what she and I had talked about. And I thought, wow, Baba was thinking, I had no idea that Baba was thinking of me. And Baba also suggested to her that she and I become pen pals. And I had never known that because I was not aware of getting, she said she wrote me a letter, and I was never aware of getting a letter from her. So all those years, so at that point I asked her, can we be pen pals? So we exchanged some letters at that point. But then I just learned that today that she's passed and gone to Baba. So if I had, this gave me a deep appreciation for getting together with people and talking about Baba. So anyway, I think I'm going to end it there, and just my last picture is going to be the last time I saw Baba, which was in 1962. Baba met with us under this mango tree at the Bung Gardens, where Baba John had also sat often. And there's me and 3B, and over in the corner is Charles Haynes. So, Jai Baba, everybody. Jai Baba.
Would you take a question or two?
Sure. Does anyone have any questions?
Are all your siblings still around and following Baba?
Well, my beloved sister 3B is gone to Baba. In 2012, she passed away. But and my brother Bill is not on the surface a Baba follower, but he's got to be on some level, or he wouldn't have met Baba, I don't think. But Claudia is very much a Baba follower. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah?
Are you allowed to say what the secret was that Baba told you?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, that's why it's a secret.
Yeah. In fact, I'm so scared of telling anything about it that that's the first time I've publicly said that. Yeah.
Was it very profound?
Was it animal, vegetable, or mineral? No. Any?
I've tried to pry it out of him for 30 years now.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess that's it. Jai Baba.